Nandi was just 28. Yet she had already created the kind of life many her age could only fantasize about. In Dar es Salaam, she carried a reputation as one of the city's brightest young bankers. Confident, meticulous, and always radiating warmth as she stepped into her gleaming office tower. At home, she believed she had security as well. A devoted husband, Kabalu, and a tidy house filled with the fragrance of fresh flowers. To her, everything felt safe, steady, and unshakable. But life often unravels in an instant. That morning, her boss summoned her into the office. She assumed it was another routine discussion, maybe even a conversation about a promotion. Instead, the words hit her like a thunderclap. "I'm sorry, Nandi. Due to restructuring, we have to let you go." In seconds, years of hard work collapsed. Her chest tightened, her throat burned, and for the first time as an adult, she felt utterly powerless. She walked home in silence, swallowing her tears. She imagined Kabalu would embrace her, reassure her that they'd face the storm together. But when she told him, he didn't look the least bit shocked. He leaned back, crossed his arms and scowled. Then came the words that wounded deeper than the loss of her career. "What good is a wife who can't contribute?" Her knees almost buckled. In that moment, Nandi realized her world wasn't as solid as she thought. The job was gone. But now the love she trusted had begun to fracture too. At first, Kabalu masked himself as the caring partner. When Nandi came home unemployed, he made her tea in the evenings, rubbed her shoulders and whispered, "Don't worry, love. Take your time, something else will come." His words warmed her. And for a while she believed him. She told herself maybe, despite his harshness that first night, he'd realized she needed comfort, not criticism. She clung to that fragile hope, convincing herself their marriage might even grow stronger through this test. But masks don't last. Within weeks, the tenderness disappeared. No more tea. No more soft words. In their place came constant complaints. He would slam bills on the table and sneer. "See this? Who's paying now? Not you. Oh wait, you can't." His tone was sharp, his eyes filled with irritation instead of affection. Soon the insults spread to every corner of their life. When Nandi cooked, he'd push the plate away muttering, "Even this tastes wrong. Maybe that's why you lost your job, because nothing you do is ever good enough." Sometimes he compared her to other women. "Look at Aisha down the street," he'd scoff. "She supports her husband, she runs a business, she isn't sitting around useless like you." Every word cut her, leaving invisible wounds. As if his cruelty wasn't enough, his mother, Mama Zuri, fueled the fire. She would murmur venomous words during visits. "This girl only brought misfortune into your life. She's cursed, my son. You should have chosen better." Those whispers pierced Nandi more deeply than shouting ever could, because they carried the sting of rejection from a woman she had once longed to win over. Slowly, the house stopped feeling like a home. The walls that had once echoed with laughter now pulsed with judgment. Each room grew heavy, as though unseen eyes waited for her to stumble again. She no longer woke with joy but with dread, fear of the next insult, the next comparison, the next reminder of her supposed failure. Nandi tried desperately to hold herself together. She told herself it was just stress, that Kabalu didn't mean his cruel words. She cooked better meals, cleaned more thoroughly, forced smiles while her heart broke. But no effort was ever enough. The harder she tried, the more he seemed to relish tearing her apart. At night, while he snored peacefully, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling as silent tears soaked her pillow. The man who once vowed to protect her had become her harshest critic. And slowly, she realized her real heartbreak wasn't the job she lost. It was the loss of the tenderness she once trusted. The dinner in Arusha was supposed to be a joyful family gathering filled with food, laughter, and warmth. Nandi dressed with care, choosing a simple yet elegant dress, hoping that maybe, surrounded by relatives, Kabalu would reveal a softer side. She wanted to believe there was still something worth salvaging in their marriage. Yet deep down, a quiet dread lingered. At first, the evening seemed ordinary. Cousins joked, uncles debated politics, children dashed about noisily. Nandi sat quietly by Kabalu's side, forcing a smile despite the hollowness inside. She had no idea this would be the night to break her completely. It happened without warning, like a sudden storm. Kabaloo raised his glass, smirked, and said loud enough for everyone to hear. I married a liability. She's good for nothing now. His words cut through the chatter like a blade. Silence followed, then scattered laughter. Some nervous, some cruel. Whispers rippled across the table like wildfire. Nandi's face burned. Her ears rang. She wished the ground would swallow her whole. Frozen, she stared at her plate, the food blurring through her unshed tears. Each laugh felt like another dagger in her chest. This wasn't just private cruelty anymore. It was public humiliation. Her dignity was stripped in front of people who would carry the story home and repeat it for weeks. She couldn't speak. Shame silenced her. But inside something broke. A voice whispered, "This is not love. This is destruction." That night, the cruelty didn't end. Back home, Kabaloo was still fuming, intoxicated by his own malice. Without a word, he dragged her suitcase from the closet and shoved it toward the door. "Leave if you want. You bring nothing to this house." His eyes were cold, empty of remorse. Nandi stood trembling by the door, staring at the suitcase. An object once filled with memories of honeymoons and trips where they laughed and held hands. Now it sat there as a symbol of rejection, proof that her husband no longer saw her as a partner, but as a burden. She didn't shout. She didn't beg. Her silence was louder than any words. In that moment, she knew the marriage she once believed in was already gone. What remained was only cruelty disguised as love. As she finally walked into the bedroom, tears streamed freely. But with each tear came a new clarity. Sometimes the most painful goodbyes are the ones that set you free. Standing there, staring at the suitcase, her heart felt shattered. Humiliated, unwanted, betrayed. Yet beneath the pain, a hidden truth stirred. One Kabaloo had never known. One she had guarded like a sacred secret. Years earlier, when her beloved grandfather passed away, he had left her something extraordinary. He had been a mining magnate, a man who built fortunes from stone and dust. But more importantly, he was the only one who had always looked at Nandi with pure pride. He called her his diamond, assuring her she would shine brighter than any gem he could ever unearth. When he died, she thought she had lost everything. But during the reading of his will, the lawyers unveiled the truth. He had left her an inheritance worth over $75 million. Not simply cash, but carefully structured trusts, properties, and offshore accounts designed to shield her from greedy hands. The lawyers had laid everything out in calm voices while Nandi sat frozen, tears streaming down her cheeks. She was only 22 at the time, and she had vowed to keep it all hidden. All she ever wanted was a normal life, to build love and friendships that weren't tied to money. She never breathed a word to Kabeo, not once. She needed to know, did he truly love her, or just the life she could provide? As she stared at the suitcase he shoved toward her, the truth became clear. His cruelty, his sharp words, his eagerness to throw her out once she no longer contributed to the household. It revealed everything she had tried so hard to ignore. He had never loved her. Not really. What he loved was the comfort she gave him. A bitter smile tugged at her lips as she brushed her tears away. Kabeo believed she was powerless now, that she had nothing left, that she was a burden to be tossed aside. But deep inside, Nandi carried a secret that could unravel his entire world. She wasn't broke. She wasn't lost. She was the quiet heiress of an empire her husband couldn't even begin to imagine. Her grandfather's last words echoed in her mind, whispered from his hospital bed. "One day, you will know who is genuine and who is not. When that day comes, use your gift wisely, my diamond. Tonight." Looking at the suitcase by the door, she finally understood. Nandi touched the handle, and for the first time, she felt no fear, only clarity. Kabeo had unmasked himself, and she owed him nothing. He thought he'd thrown her out with nothing. But the truth was, by casting her aside, he had freed her to claim her strength, her independence, and a future filled with power. She stood by the door, the suitcase at her side like a silent witness. Kabeo lounged in his chair, a smug grin curling across his lips. He expected to see her crumble. Tears, rage, pleading. But Nandi gave him nothing. No arguments, no explanations. She simply lifted her suitcase, straightened her shoulders, and walked out. Her heels tapped softly against the tiles, each step heavy yet filled with a new strength. Cabello leaned back, whispering under his breath, convinced he had won. But Nandi wasn't leaving defeated. She was leaving free. That night, she rode a long bus along the coast. Her heart ached, but her mind was calm. For the first time in years, there were no insults hurled at her, no cruel voice cutting her down. She sat by the window, watching waves smash against the shore and whispered, "This is the beginning." By morning, she arrived at a luxury hotel overlooking the Indian Ocean. The lobby gleamed, marble floors, chandeliers glinting with sunlight, fountains humming like music. When she stepped into her suite, the vast ocean view stole her breath. She opened the balcony doors, letting the salty breeze fill her lungs. For the first time in years, she inhaled without fear pressing against her chest. She was free, truly free. She ordered breakfast and ate slowly, savoring every bite as if it were her first real meal. Freedom had its own flavor: warm tea, ripe fruit, and peace. She let herself cry, but these were not tears of pain. They were tears of release. She wasn't crying because Cabello had thrown her away. She was crying because she had finally walked away from someone who never valued her. Later, she met with her lawyer, a steady man who had long managed her inheritance quietly. He looked at her with kindness and said, "Every cent is yours, Nandi. No one else can touch it. Use it wisely." His words echoed deep in her chest. She had choices Cabello could never imagine. She could vanish into luxury, drowning him in the proof of what he lost. Or she could build something greater, something meaningful, something worthy of her grandfather's legacy. As she signed papers, her hands no longer shook. She wasn't the broken woman Cabello thought he had cast aside. She was a woman of vision, power, and freedom. That night, as waves pounded against the shore outside her suite, Nandi stood on the balcony, the wind in her hair. Cabello believed he had pushed her into nothingness. In truth, he had only pushed her into the beginning of everything. Nandi could have wasted her fortune on revenge. She could have used her millions to humiliate him, to crush him beneath her success. But she chose a different path. Sitting on her balcony with the ocean before her, she made herself a vow. "I will not waste my freedom on anger. I will build." And she did. Her first step was in Nairobi. She began investing in young tech startups, meeting bright minds with brilliant ideas but no funding. She listened carefully, remembering what it felt like when no one believed in her. Her investments weren't handouts, they were opportunities. Within months, 2 of those companies were making headlines for their innovation and growth. Nandi remained in the background, but her name began circulating in boardrooms across the city. Next, she turned her focus to Dodoma, where she had seen too many families suffer without access to health care. With her inheritance, she launched a network of affordable clinics. The first opened quietly, but word spread quickly. Mothers brought their children. The elderly came for long-postponed checkups. For the first time, those who had always been overlooked felt seen. Nandi visited often, her chest swelling every time someone whispered, "Asante, Mama." But she didn't stop there. Remembering her own struggles as a girl, she created a scholarship fund for orphan girls, those who had lost their parents but still clung to their dreams. She covered their school fees, their books, their uniforms. She wanted them to walk into classrooms with their heads high, certain that they were not forgotten. Within months, whispers about Nandi grew louder. Business magazines labeled her the silent tycoon. Newspapers wrote about the mysterious young woman transforming industries, lifting communities, and doing it all quietly, without flaunting her wealth. People admired her not just for her fortune, but for the dignity with which she carried herself. Meanwhile, Cabello's life unraveled. The man who once mocked her now struggled to pay rent. His friends avoided him, tired of his constant borrowing. His own mother, Mama Zuri, who had once called Nandi a curse, scolded him endlessly. "Look at you grown, with nothing to your name. You had a good wife and you threw her away." He bounced between odd jobs, security guard one week, car washer the next. His pride, once so sharp, now weighed him down like a stone. While he drowned in regret, Nandi soared higher. She turned heartbreak into strength, loss into a foundation for greatness. And every time she signed a contract, cut a ribbon, or handed a scholarship to a young girl, she whispered, "This is what freedom looks like." A year had passed since Nandi walked away from Caballo's life. 12 months that reshaped her completely. Her office in Dar es Salaam now stood proudly in a tower of glass, her name spoken with respect in boardrooms and printed in glossy magazines. She carried herself with quiet elegance, always composed, always centered. To most people, she was an enigma. To herself, she was finally unchained. One afternoon, sunlight streamed through the glass walls of her office lobby when commotion erupted downstairs. 2 guards were struggling with a man in a wrinkled suit. His tie hung loose, his shoes were worn, and his face was pale with desperation. It was Caballo. The same man who once shoved her suitcase toward the door now stood pleading not to be thrown out himself. As she crossed the lobby, heels striking the polished floor, he spotted her. For a moment his eyes softened, almost relieved. A shaky smile broke across his face as he stammered, "Nandi, I made a mistake. We can fix this." The guards glanced her way, waiting. She could have ordered them to drag him out. That's what he likely expected. Rage, insults, a storm of fury. But instead, she lifted her hand lightly. "It's fine," she said calmly. "Let him talk." Not out of affection. Not out of pity. Out of curiosity. They settled in a quiet corner of the lobby cafe. Yet the silence between them weighed heavier than the clinking of teacups. Leaning forward, Caballo spoke quickly, his voice almost begging. "Things have been rough. I didn't mean those words. I was under stress, lost myself. But we can fix this, Nandi. We can begin again." She listened quietly, hands folded neatly on the table, her expression unreadable. He went on, about his loneliness, his debts, his mother's constant reminders of what he had lost. His voice broke as he whispered, "I see it now. You were the best part of my life." But Nandi felt nothing. No anger. No yearning. No sympathy. Just clarity. Her tears had dried long ago. She had rebuilt herself piece by piece until there was no room left for his remorse. Watching him stumble over excuses, she wondered how she ever let this man define her worth. When his words finally ran out, she leaned back, her gaze steady. Her voice was calm, even gentle yet unyielding. "Caballo," she said, "you didn't just lose me the day you pushed me away. You lost the right to ever belong in my world again." His lips trembled as if he wanted to argue, but nothing came. For the first time, Caballo was silent. And for Nandi, that silence tasted sweeter than revenge. The gala night in Zanzibar glittered like a dream. Crystal chandeliers, white blooms, and violins filled the grand hall. Ministers, CEOs, diplomats, and journalists gathered, all to honor one woman whose generosity was transforming lives across Africa. That woman was Nandi. She wore an emerald gown that shimmered with every step. Confidence radiated from her. Not the shallow kind born of wealth, but strength forged from pain and survival. Tonight, she was no ordinary guest. She was the guest of honor. When the host announced, "Please welcome Nandi, the visionary behind the $10 million gift to build Zanzibar's first women's hospital," the hall erupted. Cameras flashed wildly as she walked to the stage, her head high. She paused, taking in the sight of powerful leaders rising to honor her. The same woman who once wept alone in her bedroom now stood celebrated, unshaken. At the very back, hidden in the shadows, stood Caballo. His suit was borrowed, his shoes scuffed, his eyes fixed on her in disbelief. The woman he once mocked as useless now stood as a queen, praised by the world. He wished to vanish into the floor but couldn't look away. Nandi began her speech, her voice steady and graceful. "This hospital is more than walls and beds," she said. "It is a promise to women told they are powerless. A promise that their lives matter. Every girl deserves a chance to dream, and every woman deserves the right to live in dignity." Her words carried power, echoing through the hall. Applause rose again and again, each round drowning out the memory of every insult Caballo had ever hurled at her. Flashbulbs captured every smile, every gesture. In that light, Nandi appeared untouchable, like royalty in her own kingdom. Caballo's chest tightened with shame. He remembered the night he shoved her suitcase, the cruel smirk on his face as he thought he had won. But now in the shadows, he realized how wrong he had been. He hadn't tossed aside a burden. He had thrown away a diamond. People whispered. Some recognized him. A cousin muttered, That's her ex-husband, the one who called her useless. The whispers spread, and Cabello felt every eye turning. Meanwhile, Nandi closed her speech with a serene smile. I was once told I was good for nothing, she said softly, her gaze sweeping the hall. But tonight, I stand not as someone's weakness, but as my own strength. The applause roared, shaking the room. Cabello bowed his head, unable to face the truth. The world had witnessed what he had lost, and he could never outrun it. Cabello's pride had always been his armor. Even broke, he walked as if the world belonged to him. But after Zanzibar, that armor shattered. Wherever he went, whispers followed. His name was no longer respected, it was mocked. At first he fought back, painting himself as the abandoned victim. Nandi left me when I needed her most, he told anyone who'd listen. Some nodded at first, but the story never stuck. People remembered. They remembered his cruelty at family dinners, the night he shoved her suitcase to the door. Those memories carried more weight than his lies. Soon the whispers shifted against him. At weddings, at funerals, people leaned in whispering, "That's the man who called his wife useless. Look at her now, worth millions. Look at him begging." Shame shadowed him everywhere. Friends drifted. Invitations stopped. Even family grew weary. At his mother's house, Mama Zuri, who once fueled his arrogance, scolded sharply. "You had gold in your hands, Cabello, and you tossed it aside like dirt." The weight of failure pressed harder each day. Jobs slipped away. He was too proud for the small ones, unfit for the larger ones. Debts piled up. Landlords threatened eviction. His once confident stride shrank into a nervous shuffle. Meanwhile, Nandi's star only rose. Her businesses expanded across East Africa. Clinics opened in Dodoma and Mwanza. Nairobi startups called her their angel investor. Headlines read, "The silent tycoon transforming Africa." From banker to builder of dreams. Her photo graced magazine covers, her presence commanding. Each headline struck Cabello like a reminder of how far she had fallen. He tried to avoid her name, but it was everywhere, on billboards, on the radio, in the markets where women selling vegetables blessed her for her scholarships. He'd bow his head, hoping not to be noticed. But people always noticed. Children giggled at him. Old men shook their heads. He had become a cautionary tale. The fool who lost a queen because he couldn't see her worth. At night, lying alone on a thin mattress, he replayed it all. Her tears, her silence, the suitcase, the look in her eyes when she left. Too late he understood. He hadn't just lost a wife. He had lost the chance at a better life. And the world would never let him forget it. One quiet night, Cabello appeared at Nandi's penthouse. His clothes wrinkled, his eyes hollow, his pride gone. The man who once smirked as he shoved her out now stood trembling, desperate. He pressed the intercom until she finally came down. "Nandi, please," he begged, voice cracking. "Give me another chance. I know I hurt you. I know I was wrong. But I can change. We can fix this." His words tumbled out, frantic, as though promises could erase years of cruelty. She regarded him calmly, heart steady. There was no anger left in her, she had burned through that long ago. All that remained was clarity. Cabello was not her future. He was a lesson from her past. Her voice was gentle but firm. "You left me when you thought I was nothing. You laughed at my pain. You threw me away like I was worthless. And now, because you see what I've built, you want to return. Cabello, I don't hate you. But I don't need you. And I will never open this door again." His mouth trembled, but there was no room for argument. She turned and stepped back inside. The glass door slid shut slowly between them. For a moment his reflection lingered, small, broken, fading. Then the lock clicked, sealing the chapter forever. Nandi walked deeper into her home, heels echoing against marble floors. Around her stood the life she had built with her own vision, her own strength, her own fortune. She needed no man's approval, least of all his. For the first time, she felt the full power of freedom. Outside, Cabello was swallowed by the night, burdened only with regret. Inside, Nandi moved forward, the city lights gleaming through her windows like a crown she had earned. She hadn't just shut the door on him. She had shut it on every doubt he had ever planted in her. And as she gazed at the skyline, she whispered to herself, "I was never the burden. I was always the treasure."